This is our little sheet metal roller. It's pretty tiny, but it'll do stuff up to 300 mils wide and up to a mil thick, and it cost about $175. And while it might be small, it's pretty robust and it mounts in the bench vise. It's no real different to say a large model that can roll a metre or a metre and a half width sheet metal. Okay, how do we turn this into this? Well, we use a slip roll machine or a sheet metal roller, like this. It's not a very big one, but they're all basically the same. You have a rear roll, which is adjustable, that does the bending, and you have two front rolls, which pinch the sheet metal. They're known as the pinch rolls, and they are turned by the crank handle. It turns the top one and the bottom one, and feeds the metal through front to rear. Here we have the front rolls, sometimes called the pinch rolls, because the sheet metal is fed through the rolls, and they both turn at the same time when you rotate the crank handle. They're actually geared together, and they have an adjustment at the top to suit different. They have an adjustment at the top just to suit the different thicknesses of sheet metal. Generally, you can only really bend up to 1 millimetre in a little unit like this, or maybe 1.2, 1.6 in a really big machine. But that's basically the thickness there, 0.75 mils. And today we'll bend something that's around about 0.9 mils thick. And this is the rear roll, and what we're going to do before we start any rolling of the metal is just adjust that down to its lowest point. And then we just simply crank it through. Now it pays to try and roll the metal in smaller steps rather than large steps, because you can actually really bend the metal right at the edge rather than roll it. So do a couple to start with until you find your way, and once you've done a few, it's pretty easy to sort of get the hang of. Here we go, just crank it through nice and easy. Keep it square to the rolls and feed it through again for good luck. It shouldn't want to skew to one side or run off on an angle. And as you go, crank these up evenly the same again and repeat the process. Now it's important to mention that you should really have your sheet metal deburred, otherwise you should wear gloves or something because it can be a bit sharp. So we're getting pretty close to the end here where the two ends will meet up, and you want to take it pretty steady at this point, because if you over roll this, it never actually really comes back to the right shape. So before you adjust it, run it through a couple of times. You might find that those ends actually close up, and that's pretty much what's going to happen here. And there we go, all done. So a little bit of spring keeping it apart, but that's a lot better than having it over rolled, and then you can just weld that together or whatever you need to do with it. If you've rolled something that's pretty small diameter, like this little tube here, you can actually take this top roll off to get it out. You slack those adjustments right off and lift the roll out, and there you go. So sometimes you might actually want to roll a cone. You can't actually roll a perfect cone on one of these because you obviously can't roll anything to a point, but you might want what we call a truncated cone to, say, join two different diameters. So to make something like that. It's a little bit more tricky, but it can be done. Hardest part is actually to get the right shape to start with. So sometimes it actually helps to make a cardboard template and get that right, and then you can actually trace that out on the sheet metal. So the trick here is to feed it in so that the curve is always at a right angle to the roll. So you can see how I'm pulling that around with one hand while I'm feeding it in. If you do that, it'll actually bend that cone correctly. It does actually get easier as the cone progresses. And yeah, starting to get pretty close here. You can see it's a lot easier to feed through as that cone shape becomes more pronounced. just got to keep making sure that that is actually at right angles to the rolls. And try not to get your fingers caught. And I think we're pretty much there. Sometimes they need just a little bit of a tweak once you take them off the rolls. I think this one's pretty good. Yep, there we go. As long as the ends meet up, then you're pretty much right.